Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you love, and instead of feeling strong or at peace, it hurt or was uncomfortable? Not empowering, not freeing, just painful or uncomfortable. Because sometimes doing the right thing just doesn't feel good at all. Hi, friends. Welcome back to Aunt Sandy's Corner. I'm Aunt Sandy. Today, I want to talk about something that many people struggle with, and that's boundaries. Not just setting them, that is a big problem, but what happens after you set them. What are boundaries? A boundary is not a punishment. It's not a rejection, and it's not about controlling someone else. A boundary is about what I will accept and what I will not. A boundary is about taking responsibility for your own actions and not trying to manage someone else. If you're trying to control another person and calling it a boundary, then you may need to take a step back and take a look at that honestly. Remember, a boundary says what I will do, not what you must do. And something else I've learned over time is that not all boundaries are the same. Some boundaries are very small, like changing the topic of a conversation or movies that you choose to watch with people because some are not aligned to your values. Um, and so those are just simpler. Maybe you have to say no to a friend. And, it can be hard to say no sometimes, right? Um, but there are some boundaries that are much bigger, and those are especially difficult, right? They are with the deeper relationships. There's a lot more history and emotions involved. That is, uh, they're very meaningful boundaries, very meaningful. And those are the ones that can feel the hardest because there's so much love there. And the boundaries you set may give a feeling of rejection, and that is not your intention. So, for the closer the relationship, the harder the boundary can feel. They can feel cold, and they're not meant to be cold. So, something that I have thought about is that when I was growing up, I was born in 1969. Growing up, we never talked about boundaries. That was not a thing like it is now. But what we did talk about was respect. We talked about respect and following rules and having good morals and values. That is what we had growing up. And the research I've done shows that it was around 2000 in that time period that counselors started using those words. But it was mainly in that area that was used, boundaries. That was not used within families. And now, whenever people say the word boundaries, it just sounds cold and ugly and disrespectful. And that is not what it really is, even though it can feel that way. So, even though we did not use that word growing up, the idea is not new. It just wasn't labeled whenever I was a kid growing up. So, God calls us all to love others, but He also calls us to live in truth and peace. And when I say truth, I don't mean being harsh or ugly, telling people off. What I mean is to have a healthy relationships. Healthy, you say the truth, you say what your boundaries are, what your limits are. In Spanish, we use the word límites, but it still isn't common. That's still not a word that you're going to hear everybody talking about. That's my age. Um, I certainly didn't grow up with it, but it is having just healthy limits. You know, you don't go against your morals and values, right? You have to go with your morals and values and say, this is what I will, the line I will not cross. And you can say it nicely. You can say it nicely. You don't have to be harsh. You don't have to be rude. It doesn't, that isn't what setting boundaries is. Being, being rude and cold. So it's just being clear, really. You're just being clear. If we don't set proper boundaries, we can tell ourselves that everything's okay. Everything's okay, and it isn't. So deep down, you're not feeling peace. So that's why it's important to talk about things, right? To set boundaries. If you ignore it, you may keep the peace on the outside, but you're not going to have peace on the inside. So, how long lived will that peace be? Your stress can build, and the stress can turn into anxiety. That has definitely happened to me. That is why I'm making this video, to speak of my past experience. Whenever you're living out of alignment with what you know is true for your life, what you want for your surroundings, for your life, then you lose your peace. And that is where boundaries come in, because you need to protect your peace. So, something I've come to understand over time is that boundaries don't just come out of nowhere. They come from what we believe is true. If we don't live by what we believe to be true for our lives, then we don't have peace. But what do you believe is true, right? What is true for your life? Where do your boundaries come from? For me, they come from my faith. That is the principal part of my life. Our values come from somewhere, they come from how we were raised, right? Respectfully, with good morals and values, and from our faith. So I didn't understand that before. Whenever I was younger, I didn't have good boundaries for myself, for my interactions with people. And that was mainly, of course, because I didn't know what boundaries were. But that is not something that was taught. And I think that that is a really good thing to learn. A really good thing to learn, because I think I would have used that knowledge a lot in dating. You know, what do I believe? What do I know to be true? What do I know to be the right thing? You know, in dating and with your relationships when I was growing up in school and with work, colleagues, and everything. What is right? What is wrong? You decide how you want your life to go. How much peace do you want? What are you willing to bend or something? But I think that that is a really, really good thing to teach young people. Um, so if you have adolescents, or, well, as I have said before, I am a teacher and I try to teach this to my students as well. I teach first graders right now. And I try to teach them how to get along with their friends and how they will set boundaries with their friends. It gives them a voice, and it lets them understand what is the good, what is the limit of what other people should do to me, or how they should treat me, that it is okay to not hang out with people that mistreat you, you know, or how to ask for other kids to respect you, you know? Like, I don't like for you to talk to me that way, or I don't want you to treat me that way. Don't pull on my clothes. I don't like that. Just say, I don't like it, you know? So if we do that with kids, and I think that that's a great start for their future, right? But as adults, we need to do that too. As adults, we need to have good, healthy boundaries that are with love. Love and respect, not control, right? So we need to know where our boundaries come from so that we can set good boundaries, so that we can set good, healthy boundaries, and people will get used to that and they won't think you're just being cold and controlling. Cold and controlling is not what it's about, right? So people react badly because they notice a change, maybe. That could have happened with me, um, that I didn't know about boundaries and then I learned about them, which really gave me a peace of mind because I learned I can say, I don't want to be talked to that way. And so, here's the line I'm drawing about the treatment of me. Not what you have to do, not it's totally up to you what you do, but remember, we don't control anybody, we control only us, our actions, our accountability. So I think that that is a really healthy way to do that. That I've had to set boundaries in different relationships, and dating also. I realized my relationship was very unhealthy. I was having to take anxiety medication because of boundaries that were not being respected. And I had to decide what is more important, an unhealthy relationship or my peace. I needed to have my peace and I needed to be close to God so that I know that my boundaries are healthy. And my relationship with Him was not altogether healthy, not healthy enough, not healthy enough. There were not good enough boundaries there. I'm sorry, not really. The boundaries I had to set it at the end, and that's what ended the relationship. So I had to figure that out. I think that's kind of funny that we don't grow up knowing that, right? You have to know, where do your boundaries come from? They have to be healthy and loving and kind and generous. And it isn't a cancel thing and it's not a control thing. It is something that God wants you to do. And you still need to love thy neighbor as yourself. You still need to love your enemy. Okay. But you don't allow people to abuse you. So people don't talk about it because it feels cold. People get offended. And I understand people getting offended, especially people of my age, around my age, because we didn't grow up with those words. It is definitely newer. But if we just take it as um, good manners, really, being treated with honor and respect, and having that having the limits, right, to not let people mistreat us. I think that would have been, it's a really good thing for the young people to have now. So even though it is a very healthy and a good thing for ourselves, it can be very difficult. And whenever you have to set boundaries that are really important, that are the most difficult to set, things can get a lot worse before they get better. Like I said before, because I set a boundary, one of my relationships that was very important to me ended. And now time has passed, and I am very glad that it ended. I don't think it was going to be good for me. It wasn't horribly abusive or anything, but it was not what was going to be good for me. And there's another relationship where I had to set a boundary, and this relationship is extremely important to me. And it was really hard. It went against what I thought was good, but I was taught, I had to seek help. I was taught that that was the right thing to do, and it made sense. It makes common sense, right? It makes sense in your head, but it's hard to do. It can be very uncomfortable when it's a very important relationship. It can definitely be very hard, not easy at all. And then the consequences could be uh, very, very difficult to handle. And right now at this moment, I'm very blessed that time has passed, right? There needs to be processing time and time to adjust and think about it. And, on both sides, I guess, mainly on one side than another sometimes. But now there can be more unity and a much healthier relationship, and that is what I've seen. That is why I'm a huge advocate of boundaries on on all sides, not just one-sided. I think that clear boundaries makes relationships easier whenever you can communicate. When people can tell you, that's not something I really want to talk about. So let's change the subject because things are not going to go well. Or if it's something much more important, if it's a really important relationship to you, you need to know. You need to know. Things need to be said. So even though one relationship ended, another relationship improved. And I think that if it's healthy, loving, godly boundaries, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. And I highly recommend it. So just don't forget, there might be processing time. It could be days, weeks, months, years. Okay. But, or it could be permanent, but it's worth it. Okay. I just highly recommend it. I think it's very important. Very important. Scripture tells us to guard our hearts. Guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. That's in Proverbs 4:23. And sometimes that's exactly what a boundary is. You guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. If you're going through something like this, please remember that healthy boundaries are not a bad thing. Sometimes they can feel harsh or cold, especially if you're not used to that language. But when they're set with love and with prayer, over time, they can lead to healthier relationships and much less stress and anxiety. And just because something feels hard doesn't mean it's wrong. Oh, it can be so hard to do the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing feels so painful at the moment, but it may pay off either with a better relationship or without the relationship. And you will have peace. So, have you ever had to set a boundary and it ended up going the way you expected or not the way you expected? I'd really love to hear your experience. So, take care of your heart, and I'll see you in the next video.